He said, clear as a bell, "Celeste, my dear, the gallery is yours once Eleanor signs the last proxy form." That's when the polished floor of St. Jude's Medical Center truly cracked beneath my feet. Not from the earthquake outside, but from the betrayal inside my own heart. I'm Eleanor Vance. Most folk call me Ellie. At 75, I've seen enough beauty and enough rot in this world to fill a dozen auction houses. I built my fortune on rot, you see, finding broken, forgotten things and restoring them to their true, magnificent value. Irony, isn't it? I could fix a damaged Ming vase or a ruined Renaissance sketch, but I never noticed the rot at the very foundation of my own life. I was rushing through the gleaming, impersonal corridors of St. Jude's Medical Center in San Francisco that Tuesday afternoon. My silver hair was tightly pinned, my favorite silk scarf was around my neck, and the old bones in my knees were protesting every hurried step. 3 days. 3 agonizing days I'd sat by Victor's bedside in the intensive care unit after what the doctors gravely termed a catastrophic vascular event. Victor Sterling. My husband of 5 years. He was $45 million worth of heartache waiting to happen, though I didn't know it yet. My empire, Vance and Sterling Fine Art and Antiquities, was primarily my doing. A collection built over 50 years of sharp dealing, but legally it was ours. My heels, expensive leather, sounded like frantic. Tiny gunshots against the sterile vinyl. Room 4111. ICU. My heart felt like a trapped bird beating itself against the cage of my ribs. Mrs. Vance, a young nurse, barely 30, with a tight, efficient bun of brown hair and eyes that looked older than mine, stepped quickly into my path. Her badge read, Clara Dixon, RN. Is Victor worse? I struggled to find my breath. Fear, raw and metallic, tasted like copper in my mouth. Clara glanced around the empty hall, her face tense. She wasn't just nervous. She looked terrified. She reached out, her grip surprisingly firm on my arm. The kind of strength born from turning a patient every 2 hours. You have to hide. Now. Trust me. Before I could form a protest, and believe me, I can form a potent protest, she propelled me not roughly, but with undeniable force, into the storage closet adjacent to Victor's room. It was tight, smelling faintly of sterile wipes and latex gloves. Stay absolutely silent. Look through the door crack, she whispered, her face inches from mine. Then she was gone. Confused, adrenaline spiked, and faintly offended by the rudeness, I obeyed. I pressed my eye to the hairline fracture in the wooden door of the supply room. That's when I saw her. A woman who defined the word glides. She was tall, impossibly young, no older than 28. I'd bet, and dressed in a vibrant jade-green suit that screamed Parisian couture. Her hair was the color of champagne, sleek, and her makeup was flawless. She moved with the arrogant confidence of someone who knew the world owed her everything. She stopped at Victor's bedside. I watched as she leaned in, her voice low and husky, the kind of voice that tries to sound intimate but only manages to sound breathy and affected. My darling Victor, you shouldn't be here during visiting hours. What if Ellie comes? And then the impossible happened. My husband, the man who was supposedly attached to tubes and fighting for his life, whose voice the doctor said was weak and raspy, spoke. Celeste, my dear, the gallery is yours once Eleanor signs the last proxy form. I couldn't wait any longer. His voice was clearer, stronger, and smoother than it had been in years. It was the voice of a man who was perfectly fine, perfectly cruel, and perfectly calculating. My world didn't just tilt. It inverted. Celeste? The name hung in the sterile air like a noxious gas. The lawyers confirmed everything, Celeste purred, smoothing the wrinkles from Victor's bedsheets, a gesture of ownership. Dr. Reyes was so obliging once we explained the situation. Your recovery will be marvelous, but will require extended quiet rest, enough time for the transfer documents to process. Eleanor will be so focused on being the devoted wife, she won't notice the business transfers until it's too late. Victor chuckled, a low, gleeful sound that resonated in the hollow space where my heart used to be. $45 million in assets, Celeste. And she'll sign it over, thinking she's securing my extended care with the best financial planning possible. She's predictable. My 75-year-old fingers gripped the cold metal shelving so hard the knuckles turned white and bruised. I wanted to scream, to burst out and rake my nails across his lying face, but a lifetime of business discipline kept me rooted. "Listen, Eleanor. Always listen. And the prenuptial agreement?" Celeste asked, a faint edge of concern in her honeyed tone. Victor's reply was so smug, so sickeningly familiar, that I nearly vomited into the supply bucket beside me. The prenuptial agreement? There never was one, my sweet. I told her that true love doesn't need legal protection. Too romantic, I insisted, I remembered. 5 years ago, I had suggested it, being the cautious, hard-nosed businesswoman I was. He'd looked at me, his blue eyes filling with such profound, wounded disappointment that I'd felt like a vulture. "You don't trust me, Ellie? After everything?" The performance was flawless. I'd shredded the draft contract in the fireplace that very night, feeling guilty for even thinking about it. "So once you're officially recovered," Celeste continued, her voice dropping lower, "you'll have access to everything, the gallery, the investment portfolio, the collection, and the villa in Napa. And with her signature on the medical proxy forms, I can make decisions about her care when she inevitably has her own little accident." The word, accident, hung there, heavy and dark. "Nothing dramatic," Celeste mused, her gaze drifting over the room as if selecting wallpaper. "But women who lose their fortunes to medical expenses, who find themselves suddenly facing a divorce, they become depressed. Suicidal even. It happens all the time in the wealthy circles. Very sad, really. They were planning my murder, casually, over the bed of a faked cardiac event. My 5-year marriage had been a meticulous, expensive, and ultimately deadly business merger designed to end with my funeral. When do we execute the final step?" Celeste whispered, her voice tightening with impatience. "Thursday," Victor replied. "She's already signed the initial medical forms giving me temporary financial authority. The lawyer will bring the final business transfer documents for her signature on Thursday. Once those are secured, we wait 2 months for everything to clear. And then we're free. I can't wait to sell that ghastly Chagall sketch and use the cash for the villa renovations." The Chagall sketch, my most prized possession. An original, one-of-a-kind piece I'd rescued from a dusty attic in Paris and restored myself. It was my heart on paper. Clara Dixon, the nurse, was suddenly beside me, having slipped in without a sound. She was pale, her eyes wide with horror, confirming she had heard it all. She placed a cool hand on my wrist, gesturing for me to follow. We slipped out through a maintenance corridor. We didn't speak again until we were in the staff break room at the end of the hall, the door locked behind us. I sank onto a rigid plastic chair. My 75 years suddenly felt like 100. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance," Clara said softly, pulling a tissue from a dispenser. I took the tissue, though I didn't cry. My eyes felt dry and gritty. I was beyond tears. "How long have you known child?" "About 2 weeks. I've been his primary nurse since he was admitted. That woman, Celeste, has been here daily. At first I thought she was a demanding daughter, but then the looks. And yesterday I saw a folder, legal papers with your full name and the business letterhead." Clara hesitated. "And I heard snippets of them discussing Dr. Reyes and the accommodating fake diagnoses." I looked at her, this young woman who was risking her entire career for a stranger. Why are you helping me, Clara?" Clara didn't look away. "Because I have a mother I love very much. And because my father was ruined by a crooked business partner who used the law to wipe him out. This is wrong, Mrs. Vance. What they're planning, it's pure poison." A small, grim smile touched my lips. "Poison indeed. You know, Clara, a collector never destroys an antique. She preserves it, restores it, and sells it at a massive profit. I think Victor and Celeste are about to learn that they haven't targeted a grieving wife. They've targeted a collector." The drive home from St. Jude's was a blur of San Francisco fog and blinding rage. I didn't weep. I planned. Tears were for the soft, the defeated. I was neither. My home, a stunning 1920s Spanish revival villa perched on the hills of Pacific Heights, was a testament to my life's work. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every sculpture had a story, a provenance. I hadn't just bought things. I had collected them one by one over a lifetime, Victor had moved in 5 years ago and treated it like a museum where he was the only curator. Money, my 80-hour work weeks. Victor had contributed nothing but charm, empty promises, and a talent for high society networking that I, honestly, had found useful until this moment. I went straight to the liquor cabinet. A beautiful, inlaid Italian piece from the 17th century, and poured myself 3 fingers of the 25-year-old Macallan Victor guarded for his celebratory occasions. This was, I decided, a premature celebration of his downfall. Love you, darling. Try not to worry. Just rest up. The text from Victor, supposedly from his hospital bed, arrived as I raised the glass. I typed back, "You too, dear, praying for your health." Then, to the silent, empty room, I muttered, "You cold-blooded, avaricious, viperous old fool." The whiskey warmed my throat, but the betrayal was a deep, frozen core in my chest. I spent the next hour in my study, a room dominated by the precious, vibrant Chagall sketch, The Lovers on the Roof, that Victor wanted to sell. I pulled out my laptop, my movements quick and decisive. My business wasn't just physical assets. My fortune rested on the reputation of the firm, the vast network of contacts, and my personal collection. Legally, since we married without a prenup, Victor had a claim to half of all assets acquired during the 5-year marriage, and some potential claim on the appreciation of my premarital assets, especially the gallery itself. But only if I died intestate, without a will, or allowed him to execute his fraud. I needed the most ruthless, surgical lawyer in the city. I needed Evelyn Reed. I called her office. "This is Eleanor Vance. Tell Evelyn I require an emergency consultation regarding a $45 million fraud case that involves medical misconduct and attempted murder. If she sees me tonight, I'll double her retainer. And tell her I'm bringing the proof." I had an appointment for 9 p.m. Evelyn Reed was famous for never turning down a case involving spectacular wealth and even more spectacular wickedness. Next, I called my longtime financial advisor, Mr. George Hamilton. George was a quiet man who'd managed my money since my first husband passed away and knew the intricate trust structures I had set up for the business. "George, I need you to freeze all joint operating accounts immediately, every penny, every line of credit. Transfer all liquid assets to the Ellie Vance Personal Trust, Series B. Do it tonight. No questions, just do it." George's voice, usually dry and clinical, held a startled tremor. "Eleanor, what on earth?" "That is a highly irregular and potentially catastrophic financial move for the firm." "It's about to be less catastrophic than what Victor is planning, George. Let's just say he's about to become my ex-husband, and I want to ensure my art and the firm remain mine. I'll need documentation for the transfer freeze. You'll have a subpoena and a divorce petition from Evelyn Reed's office by 11 a.m. tomorrow. For now, just freeze it. Victor is indisposed and won't notice for 48 hours. A significant pause. Consider it done, Eleanor. I trust your judgment implicitly." That simple statement of trust meant more to me than any financial confirmation. My third and most crucial call was to Clara Dixon. "Clara, they've moved up the timeline. They're planning to finalize the documents on Thursday tomorrow. I need you to be my eyes. Mrs. Vance, I can listen, but if they find out I'm involved, I lose everything. You won't lose anything. I am offering you a new life, Clara. When this is over, you will leave St. Jude's. I need a trusted COO to manage the business logistics for Vance and Sterling. It's an administrative nightmare, and your nursing experience with complex life-and-death logistics is exactly what I need. I'll start you at a salary that ensures your mother never has to worry about a medical bill again." The silence this time was longer. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "What do you need me to do?" "I need to know exactly what Victor is signing. If the lawyer comes in with a stack of papers, I need you to get a clear, fast photograph of the signature pages and the document titles. Whatever they're signing, I need it. But Clara, you keep yourself safe above all else." By the time I left for Evelyn Reed's downtown office, I had a plan. Legal warfare, immediate asset freezing, and a clandestine operation in an ICU room. Victor thought he was playing high-stakes poker. I was playing 3-dimensional chess, and I was already 3 moves ahead. Evelyn Reed's office was not merely decorated for success. It was fortified with it. Dark, lacquered mahogany, leather that smelled of a century of important negotiations, and a view that spanned the entire bay. Evelyn herself, mid-50s with eyes like cold-cut diamonds, didn't waste time on pleasantries. Eleanor, what you're alleging is the perfect trifecta of civil and criminal felonies: financial fraud, medical malpractice conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit murder. It's magnificent. After 2 hours of intense consultation, reviewing my trust documents, my premarital assets, and the photos I'd managed to take of Victor's desk files years ago, Evelyn leaned back. The good news, as you know, is that your core assets are protected by the Series A trust you established after your first husband died. Victor can only touch what was explicitly placed into the joint business partnership and its appreciation. The bad news is they were moving fast. She pointed to a calendar. Thursday, tomorrow. We file for immediate divorce and a restraining order on all business dealings before they get those signatures. Once the papers are served, any document Victor signs related to joint assets is invalid without a court order. Let's file tonight, Evelyn. The courts aren't open, but we'll be the first in line. Now, what about the criminal side? The fake cardiac event? The murder plot? I've already contacted an old acquaintance at the SFPD, Inspector Harold Davies. I need him to meet me tomorrow immediately after the papers are served. I didn't sleep that night. I organized. I documented. I walked the villa, touching my art, the cool marble of a Rodin sculpture, the delicate grain of a Ming Dynasty table. I felt the powerful connection of a collector to her objects. They were not things. They were proof of my life, my eye, my resilience. Victor's greed had dared to threaten not just my life, but the very legacy of my soul. The next morning, Thursday, I dressed in a suit the color of granite. At 9 a.m., Evelyn and I stood in the county courthouse. The act of filing the petition, the official stamp, the clerk's sympathetic nod was surprisingly anticlimactic. But the weight of finality settled on me like a heavy velvet cloak. The process server, Tom will be at St. Jude's within the hour, Evelyn confirmed, checking her watch. Victor will be served the divorce petition and the emergency cease and desist order right in his ICU room. That fraud will be dead on arrival. We were just walking toward the parking garage when my phone screamed. It was Clara. Her voice was a terrified, sharp whisper. "Mrs. Vance." "They're here!" They moved it up. The lawyer, Mr. Thorne, arrived 15 minutes ago. They're in room 411 right now. Victor is out of bed. He's in a silk robe standing by the window. They're signing. My blood ran cold. Out of bed. No pretense. They had pushed the timeline forward again. "Clara, the server is minutes away. Do you see the documents? Is it a thick stack?" "It's huge. I think he's signing everything at once." He looks nervous. The lawyer is standing over him. "Clara, is there any way you can get a single clear photo of the top signature page? Just one? It could confirm the date and time they tried to execute the fraud." A beat of static silence. Then a whispered, "The supply door is slightly ajar. I'm doing my rounds. If I can slip in, pretend to check the IV line on the other side of the room." "No risks, Clara. If you can't, don't. Your safety comes first." I hung up, heart hammering, then called Evelyn. "The server needs to move." "They're actively signing the documents now." I spent the next 15 minutes pacing, watching the courthouse clock tick. Every second was a brick in the foundation of Victor's ruin, or my own. The phone finally rang. It wasn't Clara. "Mrs. Vance? This is Tom Bradley, process server. I just delivered the papers to your husband, a Mr. Victor Sterling, in room 411 at St. Jude's." "How did he react, Tom?" I asked, my voice impossibly steady. Tom chuckled, a dry professional sound. "Well, ma'am, I've served the papers to a few movie stars in my day, but I've never seen a man turn that particular shade of puce before. He started yelling about Celeste and how it's all ruined, and then he collapsed back onto the bed." The young blonde woman who was with him went white as a sheet, grabbed her designer handbag, and ran out of the room like her shoes were on fire. She left behind a very large, expensive folder of legal documents, by the way. A wave of relief and satisfaction so profound it made my knees weak washed over me. "Thank you, Tom. You've earned a triple bonus." A moment later, Clara's text came through. "He's been served." They are screaming, "I'm safe." I got the shot. She sent 2 photos. The first was a fuzzy, wide shot of Victor in his silk robe, clutching his chest, while a frantic-looking lawyer stood over him. The second photo, taken low and fast, was a close-up of a document page. The header read, "Deed of Transfer. Vance and Sterling Assets, Post-Mortem," and a date, timestamp clearly showing 10:15 a.m. The server had arrived at 10:18 a.m. We had beaten them by 3 minutes. I met Inspector Harold Davies at a quiet corner diner later that afternoon. Davies was a man who looked like a detective. Salt and pepper hair, trench coat, and eyes that missed nothing. I presented him with the full package: the transcripts of my notes from the supply room, Clara's photos, the divorce petition, and my detailed recollection of Victor's "true love doesn't need legal protection" statement. "Mrs. Vance," Detective Davies said, stirring his coffee, "this is not a divorce case. This is an indictment waiting to happen. The fake medical emergency, the forged documents, the planned suicide. Your husband and his mistress were planning a professional hit disguised as financial fallout." "How close did they come, Inspector?" Davies met my gaze. "Closer than you know. If you hadn't filed and served the papers when you did, he would have secured those assets. Once the business was legally his, your death, ruled a suicide, would have been clean. The insurance payouts alone, the $15 million in life insurance policies we found evidence of, would have been the clean exit strategy." That evening, I sat in my study as Inspector Davies' team executed a search warrant on Victor's private lockbox, which I had located in the back of the firm's vault. They bagged and tagged documents and a peculiar, old-fashioned ledger. "This is interesting, Mrs. Vance," Davies said, emerging with an ancient-looking, leather-bound book. "We found this, hidden in a false bottom. It appears to be a highly detailed journal. The journal contained not business plans, but an 18-year-long chronicle of methodical targeting, research, and execution. It was a planner for murder. The first entry was dated 18 years ago, describing a woman named Lydia Monroe, 52, wealthy widow, prominent Dallas philanthropist, died in a house fire ruled accidental. The next, Genevieve Dubois, 61, art gallery owner in Chicago. Suicide by overdose, overwhelmed by financial distress." I gripped the edge of my desk. "Lydia, Genevieve. Inspector, are you saying he's done this before?" Davies flipped through the ledger, his face grim. "He didn't just target you for your money, Mrs. Vance. He targeted you because you fit his profile. Successful women in their mid-50s to late 60s, always divorced or widowed, always with substantial, liquid assets, and often emotionally isolated. He was a serial killer, Mrs. Vance. You are victim number 7 who survived, but the first 6 were not so lucky." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. 5 years of my life had been spent married to a predator, a methodical collector of women's fortunes and lives. I wasn't just betrayed. I had been used as a target in a decades-long game. I called Inspector Davies back as soon as I realized the deeper significance of one of the items Victor had been so keen to sell. "Inspector, you mentioned Victor wanted to sell my Chagall sketch immediately. That specific sketch, The Lovers on the Roof, is documented in my late husband's will as a non-transferable item. It can never be sold outside the family trust. I bought it and restored it, but its official legal status is that of an irreplaceable family heirloom gifted from my first marriage, held in a specific locked trust. Victor knew that. Why would he prioritize selling it if he knew it would immediately draw attention to the trust and potential legal claims?" Davies paused. "Because it wasn't about the cash, Mrs. Vance. It was about destroying a part of your past. He wanted to eradicate any trace of the person you were before him. It was a control mechanism disguised as greed." Later that week, Victor was arrested in St. Jude's, right after being medically cleared for discharge. Celeste was apprehended at her high-rise apartment, where police found evidence of wire transfers and several $1,000s worth of antique jewelry missing from my firm's uncatalogued inventory. My phone rang that evening. It was a woman named Charlotte Dubois. "Mrs. Vance, I'm the sister of Genevieve Dubois, one of the women who died in Chicago. I've been tracking Victor Sterling for years. When I saw his photo in the news today, I knew. I have to tell you, my sister's suicide was no suicide. Victor was her business partner, and he cleaned out her entire gallery before her death. You, Mrs. Vance, are the one who finally stopped him. I sat by the window, watching the lights of the city glitter like a million broken promises. I hadn't just saved my art, my business, and my life. I had become the instrument of justice for 6 other women whose stories ended in silence. 6 months later, the legal process had churned through the courts with the speed and precision Evelyn Reed was famous for. Victor, stripped of his charm and his costly suits, looked every bit the pathetic criminal he was, thin, gray, and terrified. Celeste, the young woman who wanted my Napa villa, was equally defeated. Victor, facing multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and now, with the evidence from the ledger, facing potential charges for the deaths of the 6 women, sent a desperate request. He wanted to see me. He claims he has information about other assets and co-conspirators he's willing to trade, but only with you, Inspector Davies advised me. He's been placed in protective custody. Apparently, the inmates don't care much for men who prey on women. 2 days later, I was in a federal prison visiting room, separated from Victor by a scratched metal table. "Hello, Ellie," he said, his voice a ghost of its former rich baritone. "Victor," I replied, keeping my voice level, the tone I used when negotiating the price of a disputed antiquity. "I'm here because I want to ensure my revenge is as complete as your planning was, not to gloat. Gloating is for amateurs." "You ruined me," he whimpered. "You broke 5 years of meticulous work because of a chance conversation and a spiteful nurse. You ruined yourself the moment you decided my life was a commodity to be discarded." "Meticulous work?" "Victor, I was running an international art and antique firm before you knew the difference between Ming and Qing porcelain. Your scheme was crude, predictable, and ultimately, lazy. You forgot the first rule of collecting. Never underestimate the emotional attachment to the thing you are trying to steal." I leaned forward. "You want to trade information? Tell me about the 6 women. Tell me about Lydia Monroe, Genevieve Dubois. Give me the closure their families deserve, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'll tell the parole board you were cooperative in the future, though that will make no difference to your sentence." He stared at me, his eyes filling with a genuine fear I hadn't seen even when he faced the judge. "You're terrifying, Eleanor. I'm 75, Victor. I'm tired of games. Tell me." And he did. He confessed to everything. The systematic research, the charm, the manipulation, the faked accidents. He was a perfect predator who targeted women whose wealth masked a deep, vulnerable loneliness. He thought he was brilliant. He was just a coward with a deadly routine. "Did you ever love me, Victor?" "Even a little?" I asked, finally standing to leave. He looked down at the table, running a thin, manacled finger across the metal. "I don't think I'm capable of love, Eleanor. I think that's the problem." I walked out of that prison, and for the first time, I felt no anger toward him, just a profound, sorrowful pity for a man so broken he could only validate himself through destruction. 3 weeks later, the additional murder charges were filed. Victor pleaded guilty to 6 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Celeste received 12 years for conspiracy, fraud, and grand larceny. Justice, slow and brutal, had arrived. Vance and Sterling. Fine art and antiquities didn't just survive the scandal, it thrived. The story of the sharp-witted widow who exposed the serial killer who almost murdered her became legendary, giving the firm a new, powerful narrative of integrity and strength. Clara Dixon is now my chief operating officer. She handles logistics with the precision of a triage nurse, and her mother is moving into a beautiful assisted living facility, fully funded. Clara's loyalty is worth more than Victor's entire stolen fortune. As for the villa in Pacific Heights, I walked through it, room by room. Every choice, every piece of art, every memory was now mine alone. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely, perfectly mine. I'd survived a serial killer's attempt, on my life, rebuilt my empire, and helped bring justice to 6 murdered women. At 75, I was sharper, more successful, and more authentically myself than I had ever been. Victor had tried to steal my life, but instead, he'd forced me to truly find it. Before I end this tale, I want you to stay with me for one final reflection. I'm 75, and time is the most valuable currency we have. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story resonated with you. It warms this old heart to know where my words travel, and that my tale of survival might just help someone else spot the wolf in sheep's clothing. The best revenge wasn't just surviving his betrayal, it was thriving in spite of it. He'd bet everything on my death. I bet everything on my life. And I won. Thank you for collecting my story. Fades to black.